Thank you so much. Hello, BD friends. It's Meredith from Beadalon and Artistic Wire. Welcome to class today. I am so excited, as I always am, to be teaching a wonderful class for the Michaels Community Classroom on behalf of Beadalon. As everyone is coming in and saying hello, I appreciate you letting me know where you're from in the comments. Just a reminder, as Lindsay had gone over, if you are here joining me live, this class will be available for replay to rewatch over and over again in about 24 to 48 hours. If you are watching the replay, all of the information that you need for the class is underneath. So click around on the Michaels Community YouTube channel, Michaels Community Classroom YouTube channel, and you'll be able to find all of the information, the handout, and the materials list for the project that we're making today. So today is actually a little bit of a project presentation, but mostly an overview on getting started making jewelry. One of the things that I always notice when I walk into Michael's is how much stuff is in that store, how much stuff is in the beading aisle. And if you are a seasoned beader like me, it's still easy to become overwhelmed by all of the different options that there are in the aisles. And of course, I like to put on my undercover hat when I'm going and looking for things in Michael's, and I look to see how people are shopping the aisle, how people are looking for things, what they're looking for, whether or not it's easy to figure out how to get started making jewelry. And that's what I really wanted to provide for everybody today, an overview of what to do when you walk into that Michael's aisle, when you walk into that store and you want to make some jewelry, right? And today's class is going to be focused on making either a necklace or a bracelet. And that necklace or a bracelet is going to be strung, and it's going to be strung on Beadalon bead stringing wire, and it's going to be crimped. Okay, so that's the first thing to keep in our minds when you are thinking about what this class is all about, either live or on the replay. We are making strung beaded jewelry today. So memory wire, stretch cord bracelets, leather bracelets, all different categories. But what we're starting at the very basics. We've been doing these classes for, gosh, almost 2 years now. And we have done so many amazing projects. And every once in a while, I like to get back to the basics. So in the chat, I'm loving that everybody is saying hello and telling me where you're from, but I would love to know if you have ever made beaded jewelry before. Are you brand new to this whole world of jewelry making, or are you old hat? You could probably teach this class for me and you're just here to hang out because you're a beady friend. Either way, or wherever you are on that spectrum of super very beginner to advanced instructor level, beader, hopefully I will be able to have somebody or something valuable to share today. I know when I start talking about all of this and I start and I get going, I remember things that have been buried back in the back of my brain that I'll then start incorporating into my jewelry making as well. So we've got some beginners. I love that people are referring to themselves as old hat. I feel like I need to go find an old hat and don it for this special occasion. So that's great. Like I said, wherever you are on that continuum of just walking into Michael's for the first time, maybe you go into the yarn aisle, or you're a scrapbooker, or you go in to do food crafts and you're like, oh, those are some pretty beads. I bet I could make some jewelry. Then this is definitely a class for you. So the handout that was posted in the comments at the very, very beginning, and also will be linked at the bottom if you are watching on the Michael's YouTube channel in perpetuity, has all of the information that I'm going to go over in class today. And I really encourage you to save it someplace where you can access it easily, because there's a lot of information, right? There's a lot that I'm going to be throwing out at you today. I might be jumping all over the place. And if you do have a specific question, if you're joining me for the live class, go ahead and put that in the comments. We have a lot of people here and the comments are scrolling through pretty quickly, but I can generally, generally see things as they're going along. And if there's a question mark there, my eyes immediately go to it. And if I don't address it right away, I'll just keep putting it up in those comments and I'll definitely see it eventually. All right, so we went over what we're talking about today. We talked about the handout, which is very important. I see a lot of my beady friends are here in the chat as well. Welcome, new friends and old friends alike. And I think we're ready, Lindsay, to go ahead and turn that camera around and start talking about making stuff, right? Talking about making jewelry. Okay, deep breaths for everyone. I find starting a class with a deep cleansing breath has really been helpful for me. So hopefully that will be a helpful thing for everybody else as well. The first thing that I want to talk about, and again, I want to stress what kind of jewelry we are making today. We're talking about doing a strung design. This design is strung on bead stringing wire. It's finished off with crimp tubes or crimp beads. I have also used a wire guardian here, and I have also attached a lobster clasp with a tag. Now, if you are brand new to beading, I have thrown a lot of terms out your way, right? I've said a lot of words, and we're going to go over each of those in turn. I also want you to note how nice and flowy and drapey this is. It's not stiff. The beads aren't crunching against each other. There's room for these beads to happily coexist and be a beautiful piece of jewelry. I'm going to be talking a lot about that as well during the class. So now that we've all taken a deep breath and we know where we're going, let's back up a couple of steps and talk about bead stringing wire. This is what you are going to need when you start on your jewelry making journey to do strung jewelry, to do strung necklaces, to do strung bracelets. And there are 3 different kinds of beading wire, 3 different strand constructions. I sometimes refer to them as flavors. I don't suggest trying me out on that. But when I'm talking about strands, what I'm talking about is each individual amount of single pieces of hair thin wire that are bundled together and coated with nylon. So in here, in this wire here, there are actually 49 teeny tiny super fine strands of wire that are all bundled together and coated with nylon. Now, why that's important is that affects how flexible your wire is. So 49 strands is going to give you the best flexibility. That's the first number that we need to think about here, this 49 right here. You will also see in the Michaels aisle 19 strand wire. And that means that there are 19 strands of this wire that are bundled together and coated with nylon. Now that's interesting. This wire is a totally different color than this wire. That's because this is the bright wire and this is the silver color wire. We also have in Michaels a satin gold wire and a bunch of other colors as well, but I don't want to get too wrapped up in this discussion about the colors. I just want to mention it and let people know that there are different colors of wire out there. So 19 strand is going to give you better flexibility, not the best flexibility of a 49 strand, but better flexibility. This is also going to be at a slightly lower price point. Okay, I know when we're starting out with our jewelry making journey, maybe we don't want to invest a great amount of money. Maybe we're not sure, I can't imagine, but maybe we're not sure that jewelry making is what we want to do. Or maybe we just need to make one project and we don't think we're going to get hooked, even though we know. I know that you are. You might think you're not, but I know that you are. The 7 strand wire is going to be your most economic choice in all of the beading wires, okay? And that's the 7-strand right here. And it's 7 strands of wire. This actually is a little bit of an older spool, so it doesn't have the 7-strand logo right here. But luckily, I have this guy right here that I can point out. We've got 7 strands of wire right here. And you can see it just kind of logically that 49 strands is going to be a lot more flexible, a lot softer and more supple than the 7-strand. Again, 7-strand is a great wire. It's just not going to be the best flexibility, but the most affordable. So there's one other thing I wanted to say about 7, 19, and 49 strands, and it's eluding me right now, so I'll come back to it when I remember. Oh, I know what it was. It's this guy right here. Made in the USA. So for those of you who are new to Beadalon and new to beading, you might not know that we're the only wire that is manufactured in the United States. We're actually manufactured in Coatesville, Pennsylvania, which is about, oh, I don't know, 25, 30 minutes down the road from my house. And before we moved our factory to Coatesville, it was actually in Westchester. And I would listen to them making the wire right behind my office every day. So it's pretty cool that we have a factory, and we have a factory in America. There are about maybe 150 or so people who we employ in overall all of the different sectors of our company. So it's really neat. It's nice to be part of an American manufacturer. So the second number that's really important after the strand count is the diameter, because all of these different wires have different diameters, okay? So this, for example, is a 0.024 diameter. That's how thick it is, okay? We also have a 1/8 diameter, okay? And I'm pointing out all of this information on the spool so that you know where to look for it when you are looking in your Michaels. So the spool looks the same, right? But it's not the same product. This one is an 0.24 and this one is an 0.18. Okay, 0.18 is thinner than 0.24. Okay, if it's easier to think about it in millimeters, we don't generally refer to it in the millimeters just because by convention, but obviously 0.61 millimeters is more than 0.46 millimeters. We also have, okay. We also have, see, I'm a little prepared for class today, a 0.05, which is finer still, okay? So 0.18, 0.24, 0.15, and we actually even have smaller wires and thicker wires in the Beadalon product offering, just they don't happen to be available at Michaels. Although we are getting more and more products up on their website. So look, keep checking back, because every time I go on michaels.com, I find something new that I didn't know was there before. Not necessarily even a Beadalon product, just in general. A lot of really, really cool stuff up there. Okay. So we've talked about the 49 strand. We've talked about the diameter, right? The thickness of the wire. The next thing that you have to think about when you are thinking, okay, I need to buy some things for my project, right? I need to buy, first I'm buying wire. So I'm going to consider what strand count I want and what thickness I want. Now, let's take a step back. And remember, I did say I was going to throw a lot of information out there. This is an informative kind of a talk today. We're going to do a little bit of beading too, don't worry. But all of this information is really, really important. Why do you need to consider the different diameters? 0.24, 0.18, 0.15. Why? Let's think for a second. Why does that matter? Well, the first and best rule of beading and choosing your stringing material is you want to choose the thickest wire that will fill the holes of your beads. Now, let me talk for just a moment about why that's important. When you have a piece of jewelry that's strung, Oftentimes, especially on gemstone beads, the insides of these beads can be very rough, right? They're basically, not basically, they are drilled through with a drill. And sometimes the drill bit can be very rough. Sometimes the drill bit can be a little bit smoother. But generally speaking, the insides of gemstones can be very rough. And when you're wearing jewelry, these beads are turning around, right? We play with the jewelry around our neck. We play with the jewelry on our wrist. We fiddle with things, right? Every time we fiddle, we are putting tension on that wire. And the more the holes are filled, the more that wire fills the holes of those beads, the less movement there is. We're wire nerds. I get that. I understand that me saying all of these things about wire, it's like, really, Meredith, like, do these things really matter? Yes, they do. And I think it's good sometimes to know the reason behind me saying you should always use the thickest amount of wire, or I'm sorry, the thickest diameter of wire that will comfortably fit through your bead holes. And one of the things that I have noticed about the beads at Michael's is that generally the holes are larger, which I actually really like. I think that is a benefit because it allows me to do a couple of different things, not the least of which is use cording in here, use memory wire in here. One of the challenges that I have sometimes is I like to knot between my beads. So you need much thicker material to knot, but that's a whole different class for another day. See how I do that? I get us off topic. So that being said, I generally will start with a 0.024 as my go-to for beading. It is going to fill these nice large holes, a lot. But if I am doing a much finer bracelet using, for example, seed beads that are really light, or if I am using maybe some of these new Preciosa crystals that are getting into focus, there we go. Their holes are still on the bigger side. Just trying to get like exactly where that hole is. I could go for an 018 here. And again, after having done this a gazillion times, you kind of get a feel for what wire is the best wire to use. And sometimes that wire is the wire that you have on your workstation. I'm going to say it. It's not a popular, it's not a popular thing to teach, but sometimes, right? If you're in a pinch, and you're being very careful and diligent with your stringing, sometimes you got to use what you have, right? I don't want to say, don't make a piece of jewelry because you don't have an 024 wire, you only have an 015 wire. But you do need to be aware of the limitations of the different wires and the different diameters, and why the best one to use is going to be the one that's most flexible and the thickest to fill up your beads as much as possible. Okay, so I think that I have gotten through step number 1 and step number 2 on our handout, which is choose your wire strand count, which we did first, and then we talked about using our diameter. Now, the third thing that is important, the third thing in this equation of making wonderful jewelry that lasts, are these little pictures right here. This guy is our crimp bead, and this guy is our crimp tube. Now, I always get asked the question, which is better, a crimp bead and a crimp tube? And I think after giving various different answers over the years, the best thing I can say is user preference. There is no difference in the mechanism between a bead and a tube. There is no difference in the way that you finish off a bead or a tube, and we'll see that in just a couple minutes when we do some finishing off. There is no, let's see, what else is there? They're the same about these two. They look relatively the same on a finished piece of jewelry. It honestly is user preference. And I flip back and forth. I am a little bit more of a tube kind of a gal. That's the majority of the crimps that I have in my big old container of crimps. I know, right? I can't even, are crimp tubes. But recently I've actually been using crimp beads and I like them. So I would recommend, especially if you are challenged by crimping, and a lot of people are, um, try the other one. If you're like, I cannot make crimp tubes work for me, try crimp beads. And if crimp beads are just not your jam, try a crimp tube. That might be the difference in your crimping. So see these little numbers here? We've got a 2 and a 3 here, and a 2 and a 3 here. Over here on the 015, we've got a 1 and a 2. On the 018, we also have a 1 and a 2. And I apologize. Generally, the labels in a specific amount of time tend to be more similar, but I do have in my home studio things from all across the years. It's a nice little snapshot of how we've changed labels and shifted things around to make room for more information. So you always want to look to the label. That's the point that I'm making. So once you've decided what strand and what diameter, then you need to figure out the size of the crimp bead or the crimp tube. Now again, Beadalon knows that this can be a little frustrating, right? So we've tried our very best to let you know which crimp tubes you're getting. So here I am, I'm in the beading aisle, I'm looking for crimp tubes. Mine are a little beat up, you have to forgive me. But I needed number 2 crimp tubes. Whew, here we go. It says it right here. I've got these number 2 crimp tubes that can correspond with my wire. And again, when you're in the beading aisle, they're all different sizes. They're number 1s, they're number 2s, they're number 3s, and number 4s. Why are there so many different sizes? Well, those different sizes correspond with different diameters of beading wire, right? But again, if you are just getting started, if you are like, where do I begin? I just want to get a couple of things. I just want to get what I need to make a piece of jewelry. This is where you want to go. You want to go for these number 2 crimp tubes. Okay. Hopefully I am making things a little clearer for my future beaders out there, and hopefully giving a little bit of extra reminders for people who might need just a little refresher on all the nomenclature. Okay, so part of step 3 is choosing the right crimp tool. Oh my goodness, Meredith, why so many things? Why so many decisions? Why can't we make this just any easier? Well, because there are lots of different choices, because there are lots of different beads. There are lots of different things that you can make. And we want to make sure that all of the things that you make are going to not fall apart, are going to last, and are going to be enjoyed and enjoyable for years to come. So there are 3 different crimp tools that you will see in Michaels. Again, it can be very overwhelming. But if you use your handy dandy guide sheet that I prepared, maybe some of the confusion will be a little bit made clearer. So on my left, this guy right here is the micro crimping pliers. In the middle are the standard crimping pliers. And on the far right are my mighty crimping pliers. Now, these guys all correspond to different sizes of crimp beads and crimp tubes. And again, on that handout, on the bottom right-hand corner, there is a chart that shows which crimp tool to use with which crimp bead. But most of the time, and I say that with authority, most of the time, what you will need is a standard crimping tool. So again, we're going into the beading aisle. We are most likely going to look for, I would recommend a 49 strand, maybe a 19 or a 7 strand. an 024, our correct size crimp bead or crimp tube, and those guys are going to correspond with the standard crimping tool. Okay, this is what this guy looks like. I'm going to demonstrate how it works in a couple minutes. We'll Beadalon on the handle, and you know it's standard because it says standard. Excuse me. Okay, we got our crimping tools out. I'm just thinking if there's anything else that I want to say about these before I demonstrate, and I don't think so. So we are on our way with crimp tools. Now that we've done that, we're like, oh, phew, I've got everything in my cart, but I need to make some jewelry. So I should have started this. I assumed at the get-go that we've already picked our beads out, but that was kind of part of the discussion of which wire we choose is going to be determined, right, by which beads we choose for our design. The next thing that we are going to need is some sort of clasp, right? Here we have a toggle clasp. I just kind of grabbed a bunch of stuff from my Michael's stash this morning because I wanted to really focus on things that could be confusing in the beading aisle. Because again, we walk in there and there's so much stuff. And if you haven't seen it before, you might not even know what it does. These guys I use in my classes a lot. It's a little hook and eye clasp. It's a hook and an eye. And I like these because they're easy to put on. They're fairly secure. You can give a little squeezy squeeze here, and they look a little bit nicer and are a little bit easier to use than a traditional lobster claw clasp. We also have at Michael's, there are also, this is not a Beadalon product, but I did have it in my stash and I wanted to show a magnetic clasp. Okay, these guys are great. That's actually a really good magnetic clasp because it locks in to each other. But this is a great way to go if you struggle with getting clasps open and closed, right? I struggle sometimes with getting clasps open and closed, so this is a good one to use. So I've got some lobster claw clasps here, and then one of the groupings that I will show a lot in classes is the Beadalon Findings Variety Pack. And again, as we are doing, as we are thinking about, okay, what are the basics? What are the bare minimums that I need to be able to make a piece of jewelry? This is a great place to start because in it, you are going to find things like jump rings. Okay, another vocabulary word. There won't be a quiz at the end, I promise. But jump rings are great for attaching things to other things. You can see that they have a little split in the middle. Well, why don't I actually just show the split in the middle? Need a decent pair of pliers for this, she says, as she looks at the 30 pairs of pliers that are on her bench right now. This is not the best pliers for this job, by the way. These are the nylon jaw pliers, but you can see they open up like that. And then you always want to twist your jump rings to open and close them. But really important basics of jewelry making. And then in here, we also have some lobster claws, right? I think we're all pretty familiar with what a lobster claw is. Also, some tags. I am a big fan of the tag on the other side of a piece of jewelry, rather than a lobster claw because your wire is not going, or I'm sorry, rather than a jump ring because the wire won't slip through. And lastly, the ever popular spring ring. I actually like these guys. I don't use them that often, but they're I'm more prone to more in favor of using lobster claws, but I like the spring ring. There's nothing wrong with that. So this is a great place to start. And one of the challenges that people have, especially when you're using plated findings, is they do oxidize, right? Silver oxidizes. That's just what happens. You have to polish your silver candlesticks or your, I don't know, your fancy silver vase in your living room. It's just one of those things that happens. There are a couple of ways to slow down the tarnishing process. And one of them is to make sure that you store your jewelry in, here we go, in a baggie. You can also use anti-tarnish strips. And you can use a little polishing cloth to get some of that tarnish off. But the most important thing is to try to stop that tarnish from happening in the first place. Beadalon does have a series of items that do have an extra non-tarnish or tarnish resistant. There really is no such thing as a non-tarnish coating on it, but that's just the nature of plated findings. If you want something that's not going to just color it all, you got to go with 14 karat gold, and then you're going to pay for it. So there are a couple of questions in the chat about the tags. And I wanted to come back to them. This is what a tag looks like in use. Okay. So instead of hooking this into a jump ring, right? If I put a jump ring here, there's a split in that jump ring, but here there's no split in the tag. So it's a really nice, secure way of finishing off your jewelry. That's really all I can say about tags. It works as the second half of the clasp. Okay, so we talked about clasps. Now the last thing before stringing is to think about getting into focus, is to think about additional finishes for your jewelry. So this guy right here is something called a wire guardian. Okay, I'm going to show it. This is it already on a piece of jewelry. This is it. I grabbed one. Here we go. Yep. This is what they look like in the package. Okay, wire guardians. And I wanted to really be sure that people saw what the packaging looks like. So when you do go into the aisle, into the beading aisle at Michael's, you know what you're looking for, right? This is what it's going to look like, wire guardians. And out of the package, these guys look like little horseshoes. Okay. Fun little, these guys are snuggling. Let's get them apart so we can really see what's going on. Little horseshoe friends, right? And they provide they provide a couple of things. One, I think that they look great and a little bit more professional on the ends of your wire. Two, it helps with minimize the abrasion of, of the wire rubbing against your clasp. And the third is that they build in something that we're going to talk about in a couple of minutes, which is wiggle room between your clasp and your finished piece of jewelry. We have two different sizes of the wire guardians. You might notice this one has a number 1 here. These are going to work for like 95% of your jewelry. We do have a slightly larger one, which is more recommended for an 024 wire, but just between you and me, I've always been able to get these smaller ones, the number 1s, to work with 024 wire. So after I've said that, I'm going to do it with 024 wire and it's not going to work, but I have always been able to make it work. So I have a couple tips up my sleeve for that as well. Okay. Last but not least, let me grab, I had one more example here that had a crimp cover on it. And I just have to find where, I know where it is. It's under here. There we go. Okay. I told you I was prepared. Here's another simple strung piece, right? But I finished it off with both a wire guardian and a crimp cover. So I think about the wire guardians and the crimp covers as next level finishing techniques. So you can go straight up crimp and call it a day. But if you want to do just a little extra something, you can do, excuse me, a wire guardian and also a crimp cover. We're going to, and I'm going to show all of these in just a couple of minutes. It'll be the big finish to class today is how all of this information that I'm throwing at you all comes together. And a very astute observation as well, a really good tip is it makes these two loops exactly the same size. So that you know that your design is going to be symmetric on both sides. Symmetrical, symmetric, the same on both sides. Okay, so crimp covers. Again, don't have to, but it's always a good idea. So very quickly, I'm going to switch out this tray for my bead board. Now, this is something that you can also find at Michael's and is a really handy tool for designing. Now, I'm just going to bop this up a little bit and just give a couple of extra bonus tips for stringing. One thing that I almost always do when I am making a strung design is I work from the spool. So I won't cut a piece of wire before I make my piece of jewelry. Probably 98% of the time, I'll just string it right on the spool because I don't know how much wire I need. Maybe I need a little bit more. Maybe I need a little bit less. Maybe I'm going to end up hating how my design looks and I need to redo the whole thing. It's a lot easier just to keep the wire on the spool than to have little scraps of wire all over the place. But also it's less wasteful. And you'll see why when I finish off this design. So just a little tip there. I like to always design directly on my spool. Another very, if you learned nothing else today, use a bead stopper on the end of your design. It is heartbreaking to me when people spend so much time stringing up a beautiful piece of jewelry. They lift it up to size it around their own necks. They bring it to somebody else to size it around their neck. The wire is slippery. It's really thin little wire. It's going to fall. But if you have a bead stopper here, if it falls, your beads aren't going anywhere. Okay. These are, if they're not available in store, I know that they're available at michaels.com, and I highly, highly recommend investing in bead stoppers. I have like a gazillion of them all over, and they're just great, not only for single strand designs, but really helpful for making sure that multi-strand designs are sized the right way and are the right length. We did a Michael's class, a couple Michael's classes actually on multi-strand designs over the past couple of years. So you can always go back and watch all of the classes, not only jewelry making, but everything on the Michael's YouTube channel. Really, really cool stuff there. I watch a lot of them. A paper clip is not going to be strong enough. You can use an alligator clip. Those are good. And in a pinch, piece of Scotch tape. I don't like using tape though, because the residue, I can never make it residue free. And I have been working only in silver color today, but most everything that I am talking about is also available in not only gold color, but in other finishes as well. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about the bead board. Really, really helpful design tool. You can see here around the edges, all of these different numbers, inches, inside centimeters. Between you and me, again, I almost only use the outer inches mark. Really good also for for figuring out the sizes if you're doing a 3-strand or a 2-strand necklace. 8 to 8 is going to be a traditional 16-inch kind of necklace. And anything less, anything more, you can do the math. But my necklace today is about 9 to 9. So it's going to be about 18 inches when all is said and done. A little bit longer once I add the clasp. If you want to do a choker, you would go, 7.5 to 7.5. Just different ways of using the different markings. And then of course, lots of different compartments here to put your different beads in. But let's get to crimping. I've already strung up my design. I just did a simple big bead, little bead design. It's the easiest place for me to start. Big bead, little bead works with a gazillion different ways. I like doing it with seed beads as well. These happen to be size 8 seed beads from my friends at Dawn Bead. Big bead, little bead a little bit differently here with some crystals in between, some 4mm crystals, my favorite spacers to use. Here I picked up some of the new Preciosa beads that are in Michael's. Really, really fun, pretty colors. But now we're ready to crimp. We're gonna do it. We're jumping in, friends. So let me grab from my box of crimps, and I think I'm gonna use a tube today. So I have these tubes, and I know that since my wire that I'm using is 49 strand, 024 wire, I can get away with a number 2 or a number 3 crimp bead, or a number 2 or a number 3 crimp tube. Again, just between you and me, my favorite formula is a number 2 crimp tube with the 024 beading wire. It's a world according to Meredith. You might have something that works differently for you, and I encourage everyone to find where their best formula, their best combination is. These inner numbers, just addressing a question in the chat, I wouldn't use those for bracelets. I generally lay my bracelets out on this top row. I turn my board around and I'll lay my bracelet out here. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 inches. And then adding a clasp on either side is the best size for me, for my wrist. If you needed to come down a little bit more on one end or the other, you could do that. Or there are bracelet boards. But again, like any tool, you kind of make it yours, right? You make it work the best for you. And what works best for one person might not necessarily work the best for everybody. So one of the things that I always do when I am finishing off a piece of jewelry is I finish with a smaller bead. So I would never finish this design. I would never crimp up against this 8mm gemstone. I would always finish my design with a smaller bead. And in fact, sometimes I might even come in here with one of my seed beads, just because I like using beads that are in my stash, and even take that down a little smaller. It's just one of those little things that helps with the construction of your jewelry. So again, crimp beads and crimp tubes are interchangeable. They work exactly the same. I do not think that one holds better. I don't think that one looks better. Sometimes people who struggle with crimping crimp beads are great at crimping crimp tubes. Or the opposite way, right? You might really struggle with crimp tubes and crimp beads are your jam. It's just, sometimes that is just trial and error. So I have strung up my design. I've decided it's the right length. I've come down to small beads here at the end, and I've strung on my crimp tube. Maybe on the other side, or maybe I have a couple of other things that are strung up. I'll show a crimp bead as well, so you'll know it's exactly the same. So now I need to, we're gonna try, we'll see if the wire guardian gods and goddesses are with me because I can almost always get a regular crimp or wire guardian to work with 024 wire. This I'm struggling with a little bit. So let me just see if I can come back this way and make it work. See, I knew these were going to make a liar out of me. Okay, my next trick before I give up is I am going to cut this at an angle. That's what you get for talking smack at the wire guardians. They're not going to work for you. Ah, ha, ha. All right, so I made my my wire. I cut it into a point, and it actually is working. It's a little tight, a little tighter than usual, but we're gonna talk through some of the challenges, right? There's nothing that says that we can't do a little troubleshooting when we are doing beading, right? So I just used my pliers. I did a little pushy push, I did a little pulley pull, and I got that wire through the wire guardian. Wasn't going to do it, but I showed that wire who's boss, right? So now I am going to come up and around this little horseshoe shaped wire guardian, and I'm going to do that same thing. I'm going to push that in on the top and push it down. And again, a lot of people, their go-to for wire and the wire to use is an 018, and that's great. I use 018 a lot. I just happen to use 024 a little bit more. And so that's what I wanted to talk about for class today. So you can see here how that wire guardian is still holding that nice horseshoe shape. And now what I want to do, I want to make sure that I don't forget to put my clasp on. Now, you might decide that you want to attach your clasp later with jump rings, and that is perfectly legitimate and a good thing to do, and it might be a necessary. This is another thing. Again, making jewelry is all about overcoming challenges. So I want to put on a wire guardian. My lobster claw will fit on, but it's not going on as well as I want it to, right? It's not as free flowing. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to add a jump ring. So I'm problem solving. I'm saying, well, the first way I did this is not the way that's working out best for me. So I'm going to add a jump ring, and then it's going to make my design a little bit more fluid. It also allows me to show adding a clasp with a jump ring. Now, important thing to remember as you are finishing off this design, and some people don't do this step, but I always show it and I always recommend it. I want to come in here and just very gently, so gently, squeeze the tips of the wire shut. Okay. I think it looks nicer. I don't think it really actually does anything except for maybe help keep the scratchy edges from being scratchy. And pulling the wire through like that, I don't think is damaging the wire at all. I'm just trying to see if I can get the wire again through this small bead, and I can. So I am going to gently tug on the end. I like hiding my tails. It is not super necessary. I just like doing it. But again, I don't think that this really damages the coating on the wire. And let's see if that wire is going to fit through here. Probably not. Okay, so I'm not going to worry about that. I could probably get it to go through, but I'm not going to struggle with it anymore. All right, now I'm using my crimping plier. And I know that I am using my standard crimping plier because I'm using the number 2 crimp tube with my 024 wire. So that goes with the standard crimping plier. Now, Crimping is a 3-step process. Oftentimes people won't show the first step, but the manufacturer of the crimping tool, or not the manufacturer, but the inventor of the crimping tool does actually recommend this first step. So let me talk about the tool really quickly. So there are 2 in focus. Yeah, here we go. 2 holes, one on the top that is smooth and the one on the bottom that has a little point to it. And the order is first in the top, then in the back, then in the top again. So first step first, I'm going to come in here on the top and I'm going to make sure, and I probably should move this bead out of the way first so you can see what's happening. I want to make sure that these beads are not, these wires are not crossed. Okay. I want to make sure that they are laying next to each other, not crossed. And that's what this first step is really good at doing. It's not going to do anything more than just turn that round crimp tube or crimp bead into an oval. I'm looking over, Finn is having a little dream. He's making some funny noises. Now I'm going to put this back in the back. Okay, and you can see my wires are not crossed. And you can see how I'm going to gently squeeze down. And so that oval becomes a jelly bean. Okay, now I want jelly beans. Okay. Last step, I'm going to come here and I just want to show everybody my little jelly bean. Let's have my camera stop moving. You can see my little jelly bean. Last step, I'm going to come back here in the front jaw of my crimping pliers again, and I'm going to squish this down. Okay. And I'm not going to stop there. I'm going to very gently round my pliers in that very front around that crimp tube. And I know that there are several people here who know what I'm going to say next, so we can say it all together. Do not do anything else. Now, do not come in. A lot of people do get tempted to give it a final smush in the front flat part of these pliers. All that does is it can crack the crimp actually, but all it does is just smush those wires and break some of those 49 individual strands. Because what's happening with that that crimp, right? So it's oval, trying to show oval, then it gets crimped and you have one wire on either side and then it gets folded over. So that wire is now being held one side here, one side there. And that crimp tool, its whole job is to make sure that it is holding it effectively. So you're in good shape. I'm not gonna struggle to push that down again. I'm just gonna snip that end off. But before I do anything else, I'm actually going to add a crimp. Am I going to add a crimp cover now? Or I'm going to add a crimp cover at the end. Let's add a crimp cover at the end. Let's go over to the next side. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to the other side. And since I left the wire on the spool, there's a lot less waste, right? Because I can just clip about 2 inches here, instead of either having to know that I'm only clipping or I'm only taking off 18 inches in the beginning. It's easier for me to not have to worry about thinking about the how much wire I need if I just leave it on the spool. So I'm using my cutters. I'm just going to snip that off, and I'm leaving 1, 2, 3 inches. That should be plenty for me. You might need 4. It might make your life easier. But once again, I'm going to add a smaller bead and then a size 8 seed bead on the end, crimp tube. And the crimp tubes like to jump away on me. And let's just see how this wire guardian is going to behave for me this time. There we go. There we go. You went in a little bit easier than the last time. And because I used a jump ring on the one end, for symmetry's sake, I'm going to use a jump ring on the other end as well. And you'll see I'm using my tools to pull this wire through. It's a lot easier, especially when you have nails. It's a lot easier to sometimes maneuver with your tools rather than trying to come in here and pull that in with your fingers. Okay, so now this second side oftentimes gets people tripped up. Now, I did not add my second jump ring here, but that's okay, because what I'm going to do, I'm going to kind of do these steps a little bit together just to show what can be accomplished. I'm going to grab a jump ring and I'm going to take one of these tags and show how to use these guys. So again, I think that the tag doesn't get nearly enough love, and I think it's a great way to finish off a piece of jewelry. I had my other pliers out here, but when you have like 45 different projects open, sometimes pliers get misplaced. So all I'm doing is I'm opening up that jump ring. I am threading on my tag, and I'm going to thread that onto my wire guardian. And then I'm closing my jump ring, and I'm doing that by wiggling back and forth. Okay. Now I haven't tightened everything up here, but just because I kind of forgot that step of adding the jump ring and the clasp, just wanted to show you that it can be done there. Now I'm going to come in here and give a little squeezy squeeze, just super gentle, to get those two legs of the wire guardian to come together. And now I get to talk about my most favorite part of the finishing process, which is the tightening up. Now, when you are making a piece of beaded jewelry, it is always important to make sure that you have enough wiggle room built in to your piece. The more tension, the tighter you make this, the more tension there's going to be on this crimp. There's more tension that's going to be on each of these beads, and greater likelihood of your piece snapping, either at the crimp, at a particularly rough edged or insided bead, or anywhere along the way. What a lot of people do when they first start beading is they will pick this up, kind of hard to see here, but you'll pick it up straight, get everything as super tight as you possibly could, make sure there's no space in there at all, and then crimp. But what ends up happening is you get a piece that's really stiff. And not only will it not be a nice drapey piece of jewelry, it's not going to feel that great. It's going to feel stiff. You will also feel that stiffness a little bit more if you are using wire with less strands. 7 strand is going to be a little bit stiffer than 49 strand. It's just the nature of the wire. So what I always do when I am making a necklace or a bracelet is I come in here and I make sure, see how this is a little stiff here even? I make sure that my necklace can wrap up on itself before I do any crimping. Or I make sure that my bracelet is closed before I do any crimping. That way I know that there is not too much tension in any one part of this design, so that you can't, so that your design is at risk for breaking. So again, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to try very hard to make sure that my wires aren't crossed. I'm going to come in again with that 3-step crimping process in the front, in the back, and back in the front again. I'm going to round this around. And then I'm going to snip off the end. And the very last thing that I want to show is adding a crimp cover. Before I do that, I want to add my lobster clasp to this side. Just want to make sure that we're not leaving any stone unturned. I'm going to do a little spring ring instead. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to open up that jump ring again. I'm going to add the spring ring, and I'm going to close that back up again. So now I have my clasp on both sides. Okay, so it's a nice clean finish, right? I have 2 wire guardians, I have 2 jump rings, I have my tag, I have my clasp. It's just a nice clean way of finishing off a piece of jewelry. Last steps. Crimp covers. So at the Michael's, there's this cute little variety pack of crimp covers. There are regular, like a smooth crimp cover, and there's a sparkle crimp cover, which is my favorite. If you know me, you know that's my favorite. And there's this core kind of a one with lines to it. Let's see, I think I'm going to go with the lines just for funsies. And a couple of different ways of doing the crimp covers, and crimp covers can be a little bit of a challenge for a couple of different reasons. So I want to give a couple of tips and tricks to working with them as we are finishing up our class today. One of the things that you will probably have to do is open it up a little bit. And I use an awl to do that, sometimes with more success than others. But if you use an awl to push down, you can generally get it a little bit more open, which makes it a little bit easier to get over your crimp tube or your crimp bead. So let's see if I was successful at that. I might need to come in here a little bit more. Okay, so I'm just kind of trying to push it over. It shouldn't be hard. This part should not be a struggle. Okay, so I'm just going to work this open a little bit more. And an awl is generally the best tool for this job. And slow and steady generally wins the race here. Another thing that you can do is get like a block or like an eraser and press. I am struggling with this, but if you use, like I said, if you use like a rubber eraser, you can generally get that crimp tube nice and opened up. So I'm going to come over here, or I'm sorry, that crimp cover. I did say crimp tube. Okay, so lots of people like using crimp covers are the same for both beads and tubes. Great question from the chat. I have been using my chain nose pliers recently to close crimp covers. A lot of people will use their Mighty crimpers to do that. I go back and forth. Recently, I have been just very gently coming in here with my chain nose pliers and covering them up. But see how I'm doing a lot of zhuzhing here to get these ends together. And I love how at the end of class, my eyes are like, yeah, we're not going to see anymore. We're good. We saw for the last hour. And now we're done with the seeing. It's kind of where I am right now. But that's why we have magnifiers. And I'm just gently, gently, gently moving these edges together so that that seam closes. Sometimes it's easier than other times. And crimp covers are definitely one of those things that I struggle with. So if you struggle with them as well, don't get frustrated. Just take it nice and slow. Maybe crimp covers aren't for you. That's totally fine also. They do not have to be for you. And I'm going to show on the other side for my last trick how to do the crimp covers with the mighty crimping tool, because that might be a better way for you to use the crimping or to close the crimping covers. Crimp covers. All right, so once again, over, and I'm just using the mighty crimper, the front jaw of the mighty crimper. And I just looked and saw the greatest compliment that I could have received today, which was somebody who has been doing jewelry for a good long time, but still learned a thing or two today. So that is all I hope to accomplish, is maybe showing people who have been doing something one way the whole time, just an alternative, maybe a different way of doing something than you originally thought. So like I said, sometimes I do it with the mighty crimping pliers. Sometimes I do it with a regular chain nose plier. But see how I'm going around and around and around and around and around, and I'm doing it really slowly to bring those guys together. It's really better to take a slow and steady approach to a crimp cover rather than just smashing it. I know by the time we're done our jewelry, sometimes either we're frustrated or we just want it to be done already, or we're late or somebody's nagging at us. But good crimping, good finishing always benefits from patience. Something that I'll speak for myself, something that I don't have a super whole lot of these days, but I'm trying. I'm really working hard to work on my patience. But that is soup to nuts, top to bottom, proper stringing techniques, and hopefully demystified some of the findings, some of the tools, some of the information that is presented in the beading aisle at Michael's. So I think, Lindsay, we're ready. I went a little bit over our time today, but there's a lot of information on, oops, sorry about that. I unmuted myself by accident on the big screen. We're all good. What I was saying is there's a lot of information when it comes to crimping, and I think it's the most important part of having a good, strong foundation for jewelry making is practicing your crimping. It can be frustrating. And one of the things that sometimes gets frustrating is if your crimps aren't good crimps. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes there's a bad batch. Sometimes it's a bad brand. So give yourself grace, give yourself patience. Give yourself some room to make mistakes, because when you make mistakes, that's where you learn and grow. And sometimes something good and something magical will come out of it as well. So thank you all very, very much for persevering through this long discussion on beading techniques, on crimping. Again, I can't stress enough how important the fundamentals are. Don't know, send a voicemail. Sorry about that, friends. I can't stress how important the fundamentals are to getting your jewelry in the state that you want it to be. So again, every Wednesday and some Saturdays, we teach classes, either me or Sarah Lovecraft for Beadalon on behalf of Michael's. We've got a bunch of really great really great classes on the docket over the summer and through the summer. And you can always go back and watch the jewelry making classes as well as all of the craft classes on the Michael's YouTube channel. And lastly, not once again, but lastly, I did not mention, if you do make a project from any of the classes that Sarah or I teach, please do a hashtag make it with Michael. Sorry, hashtag make it with Michaels and a hashtag Beadalon. Also, please tag me. I'm Meredith Joy Designs. I love seeing what people have made. If I have inspired you just a little bit to try something different, that always makes my day. So I really, really appreciate it. Thanks to everybody also for all of your wonderful comments in the chat. I really, really appreciate it. And I will see you, I think next Wednesday, but maybe in 2 Wednesdays, not 100% sure what the schedule is right now. But until then, happy beading.